Hello everyone, my name is Chris Topper and I'd like to welcome you to another installment of the Figuring Out Fatherhood Chris Unplugged podcast. For those of you that are new here, this podcast comes out every Tuesday at 8 p.m. British Standard Time, and what I do is I condense important life topics, fatherhood topics, parenthood topics, and lifestyle advice into 8 to 12 minute episodes that are easy for you to digest. You can follow me on my personal Instagram page, that's Chris_Topper. You can follow the official Figuring Out Fatherhood page, that's Figuring Out Fatherhood, all one word, _. Alright, let's get right into today's episode. Today's episode, we're going to cover a high conflict parent, or a high conflict co-parent, shall I say. The first thing we're going to do, as always, we're going to define what a high conflict co-parent is. Then I'm going to share some tips on how to identify them. Then I'm going to share some tips on how to deal with them. Alright, for starters, a high conflict co-parent is a co-parent you're working with to raise a child who exhibits a pattern of high conflict behavior. And this high conflict behavior is to maintain conflict as opposed to solving or reducing it. This pattern happens over and over again with different people, and it's not just yourself. You will find out the issue at the time is actually not the cause of the conflict. The cause of the conflict is actually the person's behavior and their unwillingness or incapability actually to come to some sort of agreement or solution, as opposed to the issue that you think you're trying to solve. However, at this point, I think it's important to highlight the fact that high conflict people, high conflict co-parents, they aren't always necessarily bad people. Sometimes it's a personality trait that they're unaware of and unable to work on. Because you're able to identify it, it doesn't make them a bad person. Because they don't see it, it doesn't make them a bad person. Right, so now that we've identified what a high conflict co-parent is, let's get right into how to identify a high conflict co-parent. The first thing you should be aware of is the fact that they always play the blame game. It's never their fault. Even before you become co-parents, you find with high conflict people in general that they always tend to have some sort of an excuse. Someone else is to blame, and more often than not, they probably will become a high conflict partner, which will possibly become a high conflict co-parent if it ever comes to that. High conflict co-parents attribute anything negative that goes wrong with the child to someone else apart from themselves. A second way to identify a high conflict co-parent is their inconsistent behavioral patterns. One minute you're father or mother of the year, the next minute you're the worst parent to ever exist. One minute they love that what you're doing for them and their child. Next minute they can't believe they have a child with you. These extremes and these inconsistencies in their behavior tends to be from high conflict, or tends to lead to high conflict, should I say. You're also dealing with intense emotions and outbursts as well. If you ever find yourself dealing with someone who's had an intense outburst of rage towards you, intense outburst of tears, and it doesn't match the stimulus at hand, or there's a minor inconvenience or something like that's easily solved, you're probably dealing with a high conflict co-parent. Another thing they do is they tend to resort to insultive language, which is part of the extreme behavior I was talking about. Insulting language when they don't get their way, or they're trying to goad you, knowing certain things will get a response out of you. Another way to identify a high conflict co-parent is their unwillingness to cooperate. More often than not, high conflict co-parents just want to do things their way with no compromise. They exist, or they act in extremes. It's either their way or the highway. There's hardly ever middle ground, and they're unwilling to actually try to find that middle ground. Or if you make a suggestion, they shoot it down because they didn't come up with it. Yeah, it just makes it extremely difficult dealing with them. It's extremely difficult dealing with someone who's not willing to cooperate. They also tend to make decisions without consulting you and letting you know as an afterthought. And if you let them know that you're not an afterthought, you're entitled to actually know what's happening with their child, or should I say with your child as well, that could in some way lead to conflict. Keep in mind, all you're asking is to be kept informed, but that has also somehow led to conflict. Remember what I was saying about extreme behavior patterns. The fourth and final way in which you can identify if you're dealing with a high conflict co-parent is threats or threatening behavior. They tend to use the child as a weapon, to use as a threat against you. It could be something like you may not get to see your child again, or you may not see your child on this day that you made plans, for example. And more often than not, if you receive threatening behavior, you need to take it very, very seriously as well, actually, because one, you're dealing with a high conflict parent, and two, the threats or the threatening behavior may impact your well-being or your child's well-being, or both. So if you receive threats or threatening behavior from a co-parent you're co-parenting with, I guess, chances are they're a high conflict co-parent. Next, I'm going to cover 7 tips you can use to deal with a high conflict co-parent. First tip, establish stronger boundaries and guidelines for your co-parenting agreement. Now, high conflict co-parents tend to not respect boundaries. More often than not, they just don't. So setting stronger ones may be even more difficult than setting the original one. But stand your ground and do it. If you're unable to come to this agreement of boundaries and guidelines between yourself and the high conflict co-parent, you may seek a third party, a neutral third party. It could be family mediation, it could be friends or family, it could be your religious leader, or it could be through the court if need be. Preferably you don't go through the court, but sometimes the high conflict co-parent is just too high conflict for you to do it by yourself, and you have to go through court. But what the court does is, in theory, they set guidelines based on what they think is best for the child. And hopefully, that is what happens. The second tip for dealing with high conflict co-parent is do not get sucked in. Now, this is probably the hardest of the 7 I'm going to cover, but high conflict co-parents, they know exactly what buttons to push. They know exactly what to say, especially if you've dated or you were together in a relationship or married or in any sort of capacity. They will know what to say, what to do to provoke a reaction out of you or to get you to act out of character. But you need to remember that arguing keeps you involved in their drama and actually takes a toll on your mental well-being. They will attack your parenting, they will attack your physical traits, they will attack anything that they feel like will provoke a reaction out of you. But when they do this, it's important that you don't take these things personally and you don't get sucked into replying. Don't let their bad behavior make you stoop down to their level. What you could potentially do actually when they start attacking you or when you start playing the blame game is be the bigger person, and whatever the problem is at the time, change that and put the focus on the solution. Because when the focus is the problem, you find yourself, along with the high conflict co-parent, trying to establish whose fault it was or who should take accountability for what's happened, as opposed to finding a way to move forward. The third tip I would suggest is to establish a low conflict approach. It's easy, or should I say it's easier, to get defensive when they're all rude, or to attack them back when you feel attacked. That's the easy option. However, adopting a low conflict approach will help you and help your well-being and help your mental health, because you're not getting dragged out of character and you're not getting drawn into their madness. Don't try to reason with them. There's no point trying to reason with someone who's proved over and over again that they are unreasonable. The fourth one, and this is probably my favorite one, is acceptance. Once you accept that you're dealing with a high conflict co-parent, in brackets, a mad person, it makes your life so much better, because as opposed to trying to match their high conflict, now your main focus will be on just finding a solution to move forward, because you're not together, so you don't have to interact with them frequently. All you have to do is just to interact when you need to for the sake of your child. Anything outside of that is not needed. So once you accept that they're a high conflict co-parent, you just figure out the best way to interact with them, the best way to manage your relationship with them, and focus on that. Accept who they are. Accept that, you know what, this is a high conflict person, they probably will never see the error in their ways, and that's okay. I'll figure out how to deal with them. The fifth piece of advice, and it's probably my least favorite one, is to parallel parent. Parallel parenting is when the interactions between both parents are at the absolute minimum. And with parallel parenting, it means that each parent can have their own roles in their own time for their child. They can raise the child however they want without the other parents' interference. Literally, they're parenting in parallel, right? And this is my least favorite one, purely because information gets lost in translation in your bid to not speak to each other. For example, because you're not interacting, all you're doing is just dropping off and picking the child up. You're not speaking, important information gets missed. It could be information along the lines of, oh, by the way, our child is now allergic to XYZ. But parallel parenting is good because it minimizes the interactions you need to have as co-parents. And when you minimize the interaction you need to have as co-parents, by default, you're minimizing conflict, right? If someone is dropping off your child or picking up your child, and in that short window, they want to start conflict, is there any bigger indication that this person is potentially mad? But not just that as well. When establishing a parallel parenting agreement, you create something called a parenting plan. And this is usually very, very much airtight. And any changes to it will need to go through court, and it's usually court ordered as well. You can create a parenting plan by yourself, or by yourselves, should I say. But it's coming to the agreement mutually that's difficult. Because, like I said, this is a high conflict co-parent you're having to create this plan with. Number 6, please, please, please do not call them high conflict. High conflict people, high conflict co-parent. This isn't a diagnosis, it's not an illness, it's not sickness, it's not anything. It's just a description of someone's personality. Calling them high conflict, they could take it offensively. And if they are genuinely high conflict, you then proceed to call them high conflict on top of that. That will probably lead to conflict in the process. So when you label them that, they will take it personally. And the final tip when it comes to dealing with a high conflict co-parent is to seek support, seek help. Dealing with someone that's always egging for a fight or always trying to battle you, it's mentally, emotionally, and physically draining, especially if this is someone that you had or even have strong feelings for. Seek help, seek advice. You don't have to do it on your own. All right, as I'm wrapping up this episode, the aim when it comes to being a high conflict co-parent, because some people might watch this episode and think of it like, oh, you're bowing to their demands, you're just giving in. The aim is not to just give in, or not to just give them anything they want. The aim here is to create a safe space for yourself, and more importantly for your child. High conflict co-parents tend to center issues that you have around the child. They tend to put the child in the middle of issues that you're having with them. So anything that happens between you and the other co-parents, the child gets drawn into it. You're meant to have your child for Christmas, they decide to take away the fact that you can see your child for Christmas. You're meant to see them on their birthday, they decide to, you know what, on that same day, they decide to book an appointment for them to go somewhere and do something. They just do these little things and drag the children into it. But what you have to do is ensure that you speak to your child about what's happening and ensure your child feels comfortable letting you know any issues they may have with you. And the reason why that is because you want to avoid a situation where instead of coming to you with issues they have with you, they're going to the high conflict co-parent and letting them know the issues they have with you, which is then giving the high conflict co-parent ammunition to use against you. And you know what, this final bit actually is for people who are single or who don't have children, or even just, it's just a good piece of advice actually. If you identify signs of someone being high conflict in the honeymoon stages or any stage where you're just getting to know them, take that as a red flag. Right? Because high conflict people, they don't tend to be aware of the fact that they're high conflict. Not just that as well, they probably will not change. So high conflict person that you met today will probably make a high conflict partner. If things don't work out, they'll become a high conflict co-parent as well. So if you can avoid it, just avoid it from the start. And that's all I have for you today, guys. If you like this episode, make sure you drop me a like. If you dislike this episode, make sure you double tap the dislike button. Make sure you share it with your friends, share it on social media. Share it with someone who you feel benefit from this information. Like I keep saying, I'm trying to build a community here of people with a common goal, which is to become better parents and better people. As well as that, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And once again, make sure you follow my personal Instagram page, that's Chris_Topper. You can follow the Figuring Out Fatherhood website, which is Figuring Out Fatherhood, all one word, _. Finally, the website is still getting revamped, but you can have a look at it and subscribe to the website itself. It's www.figuringoutfatherhood.com. And as always, I'm going to leave you what I leave you with, and that's make your mission today to make a decision that future will be grateful for. Future you'll be grateful for identifying if you're dealing with a high conflict co-parent. And if you're the high conflict co-parent, future will be great for looking into that ASAP. Until next time, guys.